Hi, everybody. Welcome. I have a special guest with me here, my former client, and we are going to talk about the ISTP-Ti subtype personality, which I also call system builder.
Hi, hello, Olympia. Hi.
Hi. Okay. All right. Then let's just jump into the questions. So the first one is, what was your type journey like?
I just like take these tests and I would just like try to answer them um as though somebody were just like watching over my shoulder answering them. That like somebody watching over my shoulder was like basically in my mind. And so if like I got like a type that was desirable, INFP, it just like made me feel better about myself. I like came to realize that different people have like different purposes in this world. My personal beliefs about like what my like purpose would be was like based on just growing up in a family like where my father is a jazz pianist, my mother's a copywriter, my mother was a former actress who almost got discovered at Lincoln Center in New York City. For those of you who don't know, Lincoln Center is a very prestigious place in the New York theater world. So I think like growing up, especially growing up as an older child, only child, like I was just like looking to like follow in my parents' footsteps, so to speak. When I went to major in theater at university, a lot of like things about like my temperament just got in the way of like me doing that. Wasn't able to read social cues well. I just could get um, very withdrawn. I would just like overthink things, and um, it kind of like led to like a lot of just dejection and confusion in my life. But like at the same time, um, because I do have an extrovert sensory like auxiliary function. There's like always this part of me that wants to perform in some capacity. And it's not necessarily like acting. It could be just like working as a bellman. It could be just like swimming. It like basically um how I contribute to the world is really by doing things. When you're doing things, you're performing action. When you're performing action, you're performing. I was a bellman at the hotel. An analogy they would use is that like basically like you're an actor. You have to deal with like all sorts of different kinds of people, and when you're dealing with them, you're basically like playing a role. You're just you're adjusting yourself to whatever their needs are in those moments. Um, so in that sense, I've like always like taken to performing in some way. I do have autism level 1, and that can also like get in the way of like me utilizing like the extrovert sensing effectively. For example, the autism, it not only makes communication difficult, it also makes like motor planning difficult. Like growing up, I would actually like enjoy going outside. I would enjoy playing in nature, but especially in the States, there's just this like humongous sports culture there. There's just this hyper emphasis on individualism, and just like because of like my issues with like motor planning when it came to taking part in just sports and stuff, I wasn't able to do it because my peers, like being neurotypical, they were just like so much better at me than being in the moment, and just catching a ball, just like that kind of thing, just like reacting to their environment. So I mean, like while like extrovert sensing is like my auxiliary function, definitely isn't like the strongest function that I have. And I think like that's what like Olympia like helps me confirm about like what I've like already known about like my strengths and weaknesses. It really makes sense to me that I am an ISTP-Ti subtype. And so I think like what happened with like the communication disorders, the neurological issues that I have, because of autism level one. I think in my case, like what it forced me to do was it forced me to lean to like my first function, my introvert thinking function. Um, and I just was like, I would always like really struggle socially. It just like was kind of confused about like why people would do the things that they do. Um, Hence, I just like became like really. I've ever since I was like very small. I always was interested in movies. A lot of children are just like interested in movies, like Disney movies, that kind of thing. But for me, I just like became like deeply interested in film and cinema, and basically, it's kind of like the mechanics of the camera, the cinematography, the score of a movie, just the way the scenes are put together, um it basically communicates the intentions of the characters, almost like without the characters giving permission for their intentions to be communicated, right? I wanted to like study film, but um I didn't really have like the money to do that. So I just like wound up studying theater. I remember back in like 2005, I went on Yahoo Film, and they asked you like what kind of movies that do you like, and I remember typing in distinctively, I like movies that make me think, and I remember just like really reflecting on that. It wasn't like I like movies that just get me excited, or I like movies that make me laugh. I like movies that make me think. I think that without realizing it, I sort of like I communicated that I was like by nature a thinker. My peers were really able to just respond instinctually to each other. And sort of like me, like being a TI subtype, I just like could not get out of that like introverted thinking mode.
Yeah,
And
that's very
I think that,
difficult.
yeah, I think that like the introvert thinking, like I think that like what happened was it's really like hard to explain in my case because I mean, basically it's like on the one hand, I have an innate inclination to use extrovert sensing, but I also was born with this sort of neurological profile that sort of like makes using SE in the moment at least very difficult. So I would compensate by over relying on introverted thinking.
There's a lot to unpack here. I've got several things we can discuss, but just for the specific one, overall, I want to say acting, like stereotypically, especially theater and stuff, it often requires strong SE and FE, right? So usually it's like types, ESFP, ESFJ, or types like that, or anyone who has more stronger feeling. So I guess it's very typical for someone like you who has very strong introvert thinking and also a preference for it, or a subtype, that it's very difficult to do that. It's especially the FE part, it's very opposite to your natural mode, right? Like you're very
Yeah.
much in TI world, TI mode, especially with a TI subtype. So it
Mhm.
makes it really difficult. But at the same time, I found it really good that you also pointed out how like this. It almost seems like a contradiction, right? That you have strong TI and TI subtype, but you still have the SE secondary. So
Mhm.
there's still this inclination toward it to some extent, and also this desire to do it, but the TI can block it at times.
Yeah.
And I think this is a bit of a chicken or the egg problem with with the autism and the TI subtype, because
Yeah.
you could say, okay, the autism and then this comes first and then the TI, or it's the other way around, like the strong TI led to the, autistic
Yeah.
inclination.
Yeah.
So it's a bit hard to say which one comes first, or maybe it just comes together. Um, yeah, those were just some of the thoughts I had. I also have to say there are some ISTP actors, I think, in the real world, but they are not TI subtype typically. Like they are maybe
Mhm.
SE subtype or maybe no subtype, but really, if you have very strong TI, it can be very difficult to access this instinctual side and also the emotional side, both of those.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I guess the thing is also the irony is that if you have very strong TI, on some level you crave or look for FE in a way. So you
Yeah.
would put yourself in this very FE, SE environment, like you kind of would like to be in that, you would like to be better at that, but yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I had like a couple of really I had a couple of like really good performances my second year in that program. But basically it just like obviously it just like didn't like work out for me. It got to a point where I just like didn't want to do it. It wasn't just that it was like too stressful. It was just that sort of like having to just like struggle through that just like made me lose whatever passion that was there for it. So what I did was I focused on English, and I got my degree from university in English. And the only reason I did it was because I could write essays well enough to get a degree.
I think when you first uh, came to me, you were considering maybe INTP or INTJ, is that correct?
No, no, no. It was like
No?
ISTJ,
Oh, okay.
ISTP, ISFJ. And I
Oh, okay.
remember what wound up happening is you initially typed me between INTP and ISTP.
Mhm.
I was somewhat surprised because I thought you were going to type me as ISTJ
Ah, okay. Interesting.
because I think that with like the TI subtype, um, just like the presentation, I really believe that definitely overlaps with like a stereotypical ISTJ. I
Hmm.
think that the licensed psychologist who did the neuropsych eval, he definitely had some opinions about me like being a theater major. He also had some very like firm predictions about how far or not so far I would go in the quote unquote real world. Um,
Oh, okay.
and I think like the way like the neuropsych evals are set up, what they do is like so like back in like high school and junior high in the United States, I had what's called an IEP. That's an individualized educational plan. And so like on paper, those reports were very consistent with each other. I really believe like at the same time there was like kind of like a confirmation bias going on. I think that it was like basically like used to like really like predict like where I would or wouldn't like be successful in the world like outside college. And I think that their intention was to sort of like keep me out of work situations, um, relationships where I wouldn't be able to handle it, where it would just like cause me and people around me just quote unquote unnecessary problems. But I
Hmm.
think like at the same time, like that um, deterministic outlook, it really just kept me from developing like the self confidence and the resilience I needed to like become successful. And so as a result of that neuropsych evaluation, despite having a 3.7 GPA out of a 4.0 GPA, 4.0 being the highest GPA you could have, GPA being grade point average. And I just like progressively just went downhill academically until um, my um, sixth semester of college, I was put on academic probation.
Hmm.
And I think that like going back to like me being a TI subtype, I think that sometimes just instinctually like gravitating towards those like categories, those boxes, I think that may have like kept me like from just sort of like listening to my wiser inner self, where my wiser inner self had this like vision that like with like hard work, with self accommodations, I could be successful in and outside of college. I was just like so focused on these sort of like TI rigid deterministic categories about how I was supposed to just function uh in like an academic environment. And plus I was like also negatively impacted by how just other people like felt about me. It felt just what other people believed about what I would or wouldn't be able to like do and to be successful. Um and so like that a combination of just sort of like excessive TI and just really deteriorating FE, um, it just it really like caused me to have like a really like horrible university experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I remember when we started working together back then, you were still a little bit you were still kind of in that mindset to some extent, right? Like, it was very demoralizing in a way how they, assessed you and your capabilities and your personality. So it took some reconfiguration of your mind almost, or like opening up your mind to, the possibility that you you don't have to have, let's say, a bad life just because of XYZ personality stuff. So it kind of took some work to change that outlook, right? Um, and I think also with the TI subtype, I don't know if you remember that, but I think you also might have had some. It's called like TI-NI loops, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so, like spinning your wheels, and then also it can make you not want to take action with SE as much. So then you're
Mhm.
kind of stuck in, this box. Can you talk a bit more about that? How that was?
I think that like it like for me like it basically like comes down to just like knowing just like the actions I can take in the moment to sort of like make things better for myself, but just choosing not to do it because I just get like really just like upset that like I wasn't dealt the hand that I wanted to be dealt. So like I just like get into this place of what's the point is that makes
Mm,
sense. Um
yeah.
and basically like what's really strange is that I just like do like everything in my power instead of like helping myself. It's like I do everything in power to like harm myself sometime, or at least like back then.
Yeah, I guess kind of can perpetuate, the cycle of believing in a certain way how the world works, how you within that world work, if that makes sense. So like this, and then it's like this vicious cycle. So I think back then, so we also did the coaching after the typing, and I think we also talked about you just going out into the world. I think was it like going jogging or something like that?
Yeah, going jogging. Yeah,
Yeah. So it was like it seems so simple, right? But for you
right.
back then, that was like a little crucial puzzle piece into
Yeah.
using your SE a bit more and also
Mhm.
pushing yourself in a way and uh, yeah, getting out of that. I would also like to go a bit more into I think you already mentioned it, but how could you finally relate to, the ISTP personality and especially also the system builder? Like what would like what did you find relatable about it?
As I mentioned before we started recording, I had like a dog walking business, and um, I really enjoy it because it sort of like gives me that sort of like SE fix, if you will, but also like there's this whole FE side because like dogs are really just they're extremely sensory based creatures, but they're very socially oriented. Uh, and um plus they kind of plus it just like gives me like the opportunity to like really just really like get like the dogs like used to like where they're walking um and just like yeah, the dogs like really like me. um
Okay.
and
Yeah,
I
that's
yeah,
sweet.
so yeah,
Yeah.
they really like me. I think it's like because of just like I don't like really like overwhelm them, but I just like know what I'm doing when I walk them. And like something as like basic as like dog walking, like um a lot of people like it's just like something they have to do. But I find that like when I like walk the dogs, I'm like always like thinking about okay, like is there another dog on across the street? Or you know, like this dog did its business. I have to like find like where am I gonna like throw away their poop, you know, that kind of um so there's like a lot of just like thinking on your feet that goes into
Yeah, it brings you, you could say it brings you into the SE side, right? You're in the world outside,
it.
you're engaging your senses, you kind of have to be aware of everything. So that's like the SE part. And you have a bit of the FE with the dogs and the emotional side, but it's not as demanding as other situations would be, right? Like
Right.
you don't really have to act like an actor or performer per
Yeah.
se.
Yeah.
Um, it's more low key, so that fits
Right.
better.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, would you say you also still use your TI in that or not as much?
I would say like surprisingly, I don't know, I just like want to say like not as much, but I think like I do a bit of just like really like thinking, okay, all right, I see like a situation where if these dogs like come into contact with this other dogs, it could get out of hand. And then I have to just like think of another route in the moment for them to take so like nothing bad happens. So if that counts as TI, then perhaps I use TI. So, but maybe
Do you
that's
also
like
have
more TE. I'm not-
Yeah, the thing is, well, I guess it can kind of overlap a bit. The thing is also that if you have the TI subtype, your TE is also pretty good as well because your thinking
Right,
is good in general.
right.
Do you also have like a mental map of the like environment in your head?
Yeah, I do definitely. I just like know where everything is.
Yeah, that's I noticed this is also
Yeah,
usually a strength of ST types. I've noticed
yeah,
that they have like a good view of the terrain or something like that, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so I think this is kind of where the ST strengths come into play, right?
Hmm.
Um, and also, how did you implement my advice, especially in regards to the system builder and your personality? How would you say this influenced um, what you've been doing with your lifestyle?
I think that like what I've been like doing is like basically like putting myself in situations where I just like know I can be successful. I've just like stopped like trying to put myself like in like just like work related things where it could get like really stressful for me too fast. I guess like I'm just like putting just like the quality of like what I just like offer people as far as like just like what I do for them. For example, like tend to perform like simple tasks like better than complex ones. And so like what I do is I just like focus on like performing the simpler tasks like the best I can. And I think like as a result, like I'm more valuable to the tribe, so to speak, than if I were to just like try like performing like all these like complex novel tasks and just like being like not successful at that.
Mhm.
So I think that that's like where I just like use that. Um, am I answering your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, doing things that actually suit your personality. I think also when you say more simple tasks opposed to tasks that are overly complex, or did you say in like what did you
Novel.
novel? Yeah, I think that leans
Yeah.
more into like extroverted intuition territory.
Right.
So that
Yeah.
would be more something for like INTP, ENTPs.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and that's what they would be better at. And the thing is,
Right.
I found that with because ISTP-Ti subtype is very close to INTP because of the
Hmm.
functional boosting,
Right.
they often end up trying to do things that the INTP is doing. Like they are often
Right.
interested in
Yeah.
those things,
Right.
but then that's kind of tricky. Can you maybe
Yeah.
mention like do you had any of these situations or interests that were leaning more towards that and then that was a bit difficult?
I think like right now, um, I think like right now, like yeah, I'll give you an example. I think that as far as like reading and writing goes, I've been like told that I'm a very talented writer. Um, however, um, I find that in the past I would be like really inclined to check out books at the library where the plot would be like really intriguing, be like really complex, intricate. I would like go to read it, and then it would turn out I wouldn't really be able to relate to it at all, or it would just feel myself. And but then when I would like pick like books that were really like more realistic, but were sort of like very rewarding in the literary syntactical sense, sort of the stylistic sense of literature, those were the books that would like really like resonate like with me. Um, and like I find that like if I'm ever like writing, I find that like if I sort of like base like plot ideas on things that are more tangible, for example, my experience working in the hotel industry or just being interested in just the arcade video game culture in Delaware, where I grew up before moving to Chicago at 10 years old. Um, those kinds of things are just better suited to my personality type than just sort of doing like far out like science fiction, that kind of thing.
Right, yeah, science fiction often goes more into, the NT territory.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so usually, um, yeah, with S types, especially, SE types, focusing on things you've actually experienced with your senses or viscerally or you were in there can be more, yeah, more easy to apply or like you say, more tangible things.
Hmm.
The thing is, I think sometimes people think, okay, if I'm an S type, it means I can never do anything abstract or whatever. I mean, that's not really the case, right? Like you can do abstract things, but it usually has to be in your wheelhouse, or usually there still has to be a bit of a tangible
Hmm.
experiential element to it to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah.
It cannot be fully out there, but once
Right.
again, it kind of depends on the individual as well. Yeah, can you maybe, like, just recommend some books that you found that, suited your personality, or is that tricky?
No, no, it's not. So there are actually a couple. One book is called American Pastoral by Philip Roth. What I really liked about it was just like how like the sensory detail um, just sort of makes the book almost otherworldly. And I would like contrast that with like somebody like Philip K. Dick, perhaps, because like some when I would try to read The Man in the High Castle, it literally is like set in an alternate universe where the Germans and the Japanese won World War II. But like as I'm like reading the descriptions of that world, um, they just like almost seem dry to me. Like you would
Mm,
like the way like we're all conditioned to like sort of like conceptualize like sensory and intuition. We're sort of conditioned to think of like the sensory as sort of like the dry type, whereas like the intuitive type, like they're the lively type. But it doesn't really like work like that.
mm.
Sometimes like intuitives get like so caught up in exploring like theories and possibilities in their mind that when they communicate them to people, it just comes across as dry, despite like the
Okay,
ideas themselves being fascinating. Have you ever experienced that?
that's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I think maybe I wonder if it's because of your own type bias a little bit that you
Yeah,
find the any kind of uninteresting or not like extrovert intuition or ideas just for their own sake are not really that captivating, I guess. Personally speaking, I just sometimes find certain ideas just kind of superfluous.
yeah,
Maybe not dry, but kind of like
right.
it's not really necessary, that kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting that you make that comparison.
Yeah,
So, um, so yeah, how do you relate to intuition then? I guess I think we kind of tried to mention it already, but how
yeah.
do you relate to, let's
Right.
say, your introverted intuition?
That's a really good question. It's just like,
Probably tricky to
yeah,
answer, but
yeah, yeah. I think that thing about it is that I think that especially like back when I was going to college, I just like had this vision of myself, like despite like struggling with like SE and FE, I was gonna make it in acting. I was gonna get that BFA in fine arts and theater. And I just even like have this idea of just like this whole like cliche of like hunting type idea where I would just I would be like kind of like Matt Damon, I don't know. And I would meet like somebody who was kind of like Ben Affleck, and we would write some kind of play or something, and just really just cliche stuff that I think like even like a neurotypical kid into theater would just think of. I mean, you know, um, I think that just like kids back then my age, like they have like these like really like funny ideas about just how the world is going to like shape up for them in the future. And but I think like because like we were talking about, I was like so just entrenched in that TI-NI loop. I would like take that NI vision literally. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And and when that just like didn't work out, I would just get really dejected.
Ah, yeah, that's
Whereas like
interesting. Yeah.
somebody else, who's like more attuned to SE, FE, um, they would just sort of like change. They would just like sort of like change how they use like their NI to relate to their future, like based on like just like everything like happening around them and stuff. And I just like wasn't really able to do that. So.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess you could say, yeah, TI and I in a loop becomes overly rigid or attached to a certain vision and pursuing that.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and then when that doesn't work, it seems like, okay, I guess that's it. Kind of like, like,
Yeah,
okay, I
yeah.
guess there's nothing else I can do. It's very
Well,
tunnel vision if it's unhealthy.
mhm. I'd say like I'm quite in tune like with my inner experiences, but what's really strange about that is I get so like focused in my inner experiences, it just like makes it like a lot harder for me to be aware of just like my external body language. Um,
Mhm.
like for instance, I could just be like feeling like really excited about something, but somebody might come up to me and be like, "Oh, you look really agitated right now." And it's just like this like disconnect between just um how I feel like inwardly and just like what I like my demeanor like outwardly.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this can also be it's just the feeling disconnect as well, right? So, like,
Mhm. Yeah.
maybe also FI versus FE a little bit. Like, internally, you
Mhm.
might feel maybe not too bad or, like,
Yeah.
pretty positive, but it's hard to
Yeah.
the FE because the FE is also so weak to kinda bring that
Yeah.
into your demeanor is a bit blocked, I guess. Like, the TI is
Yeah.
too strong or the introversion is just too strong.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I heard with a lot of people who have high introversion, especially also ISTP-Ti, they often have, like they're a bit stone-faced or, like, they find it hard to, you know, show their emotion as much as they would want to.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've also experienced that.
Yeah, also, like, something that just, like, really has, like, bothered me is that, um, I think, like, because, like, I can sort of, like, be really stone-faced at times, like you said, I think a lot of people just mistake me for being cold and unfeeling, and, uh, it just, like, really just, like, it really just, like, really upsets me on so many different levels, you know?
Yeah, because you
Yeah.
don't wanna you're not like that, and you also don't wanna look like that.
Mm.
I think it's
Right.
also I think it's also difference between that and, like, ICJ, INTJ, who in sociologists have FE, point of least resistance, or vulnerable or polar, where
Mhm.
they don't really value FE, so
Mhm.
they don't mind as much coming across as a bit unfeeling. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's not
Right.
they don't really need to come across as very warm. I think FE usually is more about emotional warmth,
Mhm.
um, and yeah, if you value that function, especially as an ICP-Ti, sometimes it's like, "Oh, I wish" right? Like, kinda wishing it would be better.
Yeah. There is one thing. This actually has to do with like my quote unquote type journey. I remember like after I got typed by you, I just like went to just like four different typologists.
Okay.
Do you remember this?
I'm not sure. Maybe yeah, I think yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And so I went to one, they typed me as an INTJ.
Okay.
I went to another one, they typed me as an ISTP. I went to another one, they typed me as an INTJ, and I went to another one, they typed me as ISTJ. Then I went to the last one, they typed me as an INTP.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, all
yeah.
kinds of types. I mean, at least
But
it's
I think
IT
like
is
I think
consistent.
your type is like the most accurate. I really do.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, can you maybe say what makes you think it's the most accurate?
the way you type it just like really just like takes into account just sort of like nuances between like just how like different people of the same type um, demonstrate that type. For example, just like me being an ISTP like TI subtype versus an ISTP like SE subtype versus an ISTP regular type. That just like explains like so much more accurately in my understanding compared to like somebody who just like gives me an INTJ type or an INTP or I think like yours is the most accurate. So
Yeah, cool. You really have to take into account that some people don't fit just the standard version of the type, which I call no subtype ISTP, for example. You really have to see, okay, when someone leans more into introversion or more into extroversion, it really does impact how the type expresses itself and also what their functional strengths and weaknesses are. And to kind of just summarize it also for the people watching is really the difference between like ICP-Ti and INTP, right? It can be really hard to know the difference sometimes. Is that okay? Both of them have strong TI and they value TI, but one of them values expert sensing and the other one doesn't. And
Okay.
sometimes with ISTP-Ti, because they have like these Ti-Ni loops, it can be difficult for them sometimes to access their secondary SE.
Mhm.
But they want to do it, and it gives them, yeah, I guess you could say pleasure, or it just makes them feel better as well about themselves and their lives. Versus
Mhm.
INTP-Ti, let's say, they have to go into expert intuition instead, and they prefer doing that, and that makes them happier, feel more fulfilled, and this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So this is like it's just general differences.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, because yeah, it's just these things just play a role. Um, Not everyone is going to be the best at their second function, even though it's technically supposed to be their second one.
Right.
But yeah, it's if you're very introverted, like in this case, it will be more
Mhm.
difficult to access your extroverted functions in general.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so this is how I went with this subtype theory.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So who would you recommend this typing for? Like getting typed by me or coached by me? Or who do you think would be a good fit?
That, especially like somebody where they just like, they just like want to like really like know more about um just like why just like different like aspects of their personality like seem to contradict other aspects. And I think like especially in my case it was really helpful because like you pointed like me in the direction of an ISTP-Ti subtype, and that just explained like so much. So yeah, sort of like just like trying out like these different types, it really like I personally like relate to the perceiving aspect of that. Like the perceiving aspect for me, it's just like I just need to like see what's out there. And I remember like when you did a report, you actually said my NE was strong for my subtype. And I think that, just growing up in a household where NE was valued and just like me being a perceiving type, it's just like just want to see that everything that's out there in the world, even if it's perhaps especially if it's like really strange.
Yeah, yeah, you have this. I mean, everyone. So a perceiver in MBTI terms, they have extrovert sensing or extrovert intuition in their first or second function. Yeah, functioning. Yeah, and as a perceiver, in that sense, you're way more open to external input, I guess, right? Like
Right.
with the
Yeah.
SE, both SE and NE both do that in their own ways.
Hmm. Right.
So you really like, okay, I want to see what happens and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think well, the thing is also any expert intuition is technically not the weakest function for this type, even though
Right.
in socionics they say it's the point of least resistance and vulnerable function, which is
Hmm.
true because
Hmm.
you don't like the function as much and you're not that great at it. So that's
Right.
why. But technically your weakest function is expert feeling.
Yeah.
So I think this is part of the reason probably why I also said your expert intuition is technically not the worst.
Right.
So you can kind of use it and stuff like that, but
Hmm.
it's not gonna make you happy basically.
Right.
So yeah, I guess I guess at the end, what are your takeaways and what kind of advice would you give to someone who has your personality? What advice would you give yourself then, like many
Um,
years ago before you found out about this?
I think like the advice I would give is for myself is to just, and like perhaps like anybody else with this like subtype, is to um really like take your time, go at your own pace when it comes to like giving like extrovert sensing a chance. 'Cause, like extrovert sensing is like eventually if you give it a chance, it's gonna like really fulfill you. But because you're a TI subtype, you just have to like give it a chance. And I think that um I think that for like this subtype, I think it's like really important. If I were like speaking to anybody with this subtype, it's like really important to sort of like let yourself step out of that TI bubble. So, okay, You just have to just sort of like give yourself the grace to step outside your TI bubble and experience like the sensory, you know, slowly but surely take up space, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So,
I think
yeah,
that's really good advice. I think it's
yeah,
really, really important to mention because this is just something I've noticed in a lot of cases when people get typed as like INTJ or INFJ online, they are actually ISTP-Ti or
hmm
ISFP-Fi. So people who have
hmm
high introversion and technically their extrovert sensing is actually their secondary function. But because
hmm
of their loops and their introversion, they're not really
right,
they think it's not that important or
hmm
um, but then once they do it more and they tap into that side of themselves, it brings out the entirety of their personality more.
right, right,
Versus if it's someone who's INFJ or like in actuality INFJ or INTJ,
right,
they have to go more into the FE or TE to feel more
hmm
well-rounded.
right,
But for example, in your case, I mean, you kind of did try to go more into the FE, but it's just too weak. So
hmm yeah,
it just doesn't do much, right?
right, right.
Yeah, yeah, how would you very shortly, how would you compare that? Like, you going into SE versus FE, the experience?
So I think like with I think like really like with SE, they're really um I mean like the thing about like FE by definition is an anti-individualist function.
Yeah.
It's by definition almost exclusively tribe based.
Mhm.
Um, you could argue that like social observation from a distance is technically FE, but really that could also fall under like TI and NI. Um, but I think like as far as like SE goes, SE kind of like goes with like everything. Um, it's just you can like do SE with like the tribe. You can do SE individually. SE is an extremely adaptable function. And it's just like a vastly underrated function as well.
Yeah, that's also another good point. Technically, you can use SE without people, if that makes sense.
hmm
Um,
Yeah.
you don't need to have people, but with FE and I guess also to some extent FI, there's always a people element. Like you always have to be with
hmm
people, or it's very much connected.
hmm
Versus SE, you can technically even do SE by yourself. I don't know, like going into nature, for example, or
hmm
um, yeah,
I was just gonna say that I had a mentor who just like took me out to nature, and it was just so soothing for me. Just really, really helpful, really grounding. Just it really just like helps like alleviate like a lot of stress in my life. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Probably how you can get out of the loop once again.
Yes.
You
Yes.
have to kind of make yourself you have to kind of push yourself a little bit to go into that.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess yeah, so we're gonna close it here. If you would for you watching, if you would like to get typed by me or coached by me, you can find the information in the description box. You can also find my type descriptions there as well. So if you want to get typed or type coach, or if you want to read more about the system builder, all the information is in the description box. Okay, so yeah, have a good day and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.